So I want to start with acknowledging our sponsors, United Way. Please stand, Tom. Accreditation Guru, Jennifer. Madison Approach Staffing, Allison. Charles Newman Insurance, I'm not sure if he's here, but he's registered. He'll be in shortly, I'm sure. And the Westchester Library System, in addition to providing us free space and helping us really organize every event. They've just been incredible. And of course, my team at NPW, Amy Rivera and Suzanne Gardos, who's outside. We also had a number of partners that you'll see on the sign outside that helped us with this event. So thank you to them. We're really excited, all of us, to be here today. I do want to acknowledge an incredible group of people that really have worked with me and taught me about the importance of inclusion, disabilities inclusion. And as I look into the crowd, I realize I made a mistake. This group really started with Marjorie Madfis, who is the former executive director of Yes She Can. So Marjorie, please stand. And along with her, Kathleen Macias-Torres, who's the executive director of SPARC, right up front. Susan Fox, CEO of Westchester Institute for Human Development. Jacqueline Mamarsky, program coordinator, My Sister's Place. Nancy Miller, CEO Visions. Maria Samuels, Westchester Disabled on the Move. The Roundtable started 2 years ago, and it really is a space for providers and people across disabilities to come together and advocate for people with disabilities. So thank you all, and thank you to all the members of the committee. I want to thank also, we have volunteers here today who just came to help us out to make sure this was accessible for everyone. Mary Kunisel, Steve Navarez, and Barbara Pop. They just came to support our efforts here. And some other important acknowledgments. I get to do all the acknowledgments. Iris Weintraub from Office of Assemblyman Chris Burdick, who we know is a staunch advocate for people with disabilities. Evan Latainer, Director, Westchester County Office for People with Disabilities, up there. Shari Asher, Director of Policy and Programs, Small Businesses and Chambers of Commerce, and liaison to the Office for People with Disabilities, long title, important work. Michelle Green, District Coordinator for Workforce Development and Business Relations, Access VR. And I also want to acknowledge Jason Chapin from the Westchester County Association for your leadership on workforce development in the county. We're doing truly amazing things with Jason and with the Westchester County Association. So thank you for always including us as a partner, as a thought leader. We love working with you. And last, but certainly not least, it is my pleasure to introduce Kathleen Macias-Torres. She is the Executive Director of SPARC, an NPW board member, and chair of the NPW Disabilities Roundtable. Kathleen takes her work very seriously. Whatever she does it from beginning to end. And she worked tirelessly to put this event together along with our panelists that she will introduce. We met numerous times, and really, if it were not for Kathleen, her passion, expertise, and commitment, this wouldn't have happened today. So Kathleen, I could say so much more, but thank you so much for everything you do. Thanking our sponsors, our mission, and please become a member. And now I have to exit out somehow, but I'm going to have someone else do that.
Go to the other
Yes.
slide deck. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Jan. And I want to thank so much for Nonprofit Westchester for really making this possible. Jan, thank you so much for your commitment and your driving force in planning this presentation today. I really commend you for really fighting for rights of people and on the equality. You are a true force, and I really appreciate your support. As a leader serving organizations in the field of developmental disabilities and a parent of a child with a disability, I share the same passion. So thank you. I also want to thank the Disabilities Advisory Committee for their support, their time, advocacy, and dedication. I'm so glad to see some of you here today. In such a short time, we've really truly have accomplished so much by providing awareness and bringing light to important conversations regarding inclusion and accessibility for people with disabilities. I want to take the opportunity now to thank our speaker, Jeffrey Tamburo, from the Yang-Tang Institute at Cornell University, and he's also at the Northeast ADA Center. And to our panelists for being here today, Sean Meade, General Manager of the Cambria Hotel, James Mase, the Director of Giving from the Prospector Theater, and Jacqueline Mamarski, Program Coordinator from My Sister's Place. Thank you. It is with excitement that I open this program to provide a platform to discuss the many ways that people with disabilities can and should be given the opportunity to enrich our workplaces. Employing people with disabilities, as you will hear today, is not a charity work. It is an opportunity to buy the talent of skillful and qualified diverse people, and a chance for our Westchester community to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and access for people with disabilities. Before we start, I want to provide with some recent statistics. According to the CDC, the most recent numbers indicate that 1 out of 4 people in the US have a diagnosed disability. Some of those disabilities are invisible to the eye. Statistics also show from the US Department of Labor indicated in 2022, 21.3% of persons with disabilities were employed compared to persons without a disability was 65.4%. In 2022, the unemployment rates for a person with a disability was 7.6%, and a person without a disability was 3.5%. As a result of COVID, it really affected the workforce for people with disabilities. And even though the ADA, the Americans Disability Act, became in effect in 1990, there are still many barriers for people with disabilities that face today. I hope that today, with valuable resources and information provided today to businesses, you will be prepared to tap into a largely untapped talent of differently abled people. We must work towards achieving DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and access in all aspects of our community, as well as recognizing that people with disabilities bring value to our society and the workplace. It is now my pleasure to introduce Jeffrey Tamburo, who is here representing the Yang-Tang Institute and the Northeast ADA Center. Jeffrey is a Training and Content Development Associate for the Yang-Tang Institute since 2015. Jeffrey has served as a lead trainer for New York State Consortium for Advancing and Supporting Employment, which stands now New York CASE. The New York CASE strives to enhance the capacity and proficiency of statewide employment to service providers. Jeffrey also works as a training specialist for the Northeast ADA Center, where he provides training and technical assistance on Americans Disability Act to individuals and organizations in New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the US. Jeffrey is focused on strengthening relationships between employment services, professionals, and businesses through the development of wide-based tools designed to improve placement that lead to employment and outcomes for people with disabilities.
All right, so good morning, everybody. I am so excited to be here. After that wonderful introduction that Kathleen did, I always say you have nowhere to go but down after someone, touts your praises. But just also by way of introduction, I'm Jeffrey Tamburo. I'm here representing the Northeast ADA Center, which is one of our projects at the Yang-Tan Institute at Cornell. So I'm an educator for about the past 10 years. I've been kind of full-time at Cornell, really, going around the state and the country and talking to different individuals and entities and organizations and employers about the business value of working with and hiring people with disabilities. Prior to that, I was an employment service professional. I ran a program in Syracuse, which is where I live, that helps people with disabilities get employed. I was out there working with my contacts and colleagues at Access VR, pounding the pavement and working with employers, and probably sometimes not doing a very good job as an employment professional, but I've learned a lot along the way. And the other hat that I wear that I think is really important to today's conversation is that I have been a part of a small family business. In 1949, my grandfather started a small restaurant in Syracuse that still exists today. I still work there on Friday nights. It's a fish fry. This time of year, we're a little busy. And I share that. My sister runs it now. It's a lot of work, so let her do it. And my brother-in-law, but I share that because it's another lens through which I view the world sometimes as having been an employer, and a small employer, which I'm going to speak to that research in a minute. So I mentioned that one of the projects.
Do you want to swap out?
I would love to swap out.
Okay. Here you go.
Thank
Put
you.
that on for me.
Look at that.
Okay, just click this on. Hello, test.
All right. Thank you. How's that? Do I sound all right? Yeah. Good enough? Okay. I'm pretty loud too, but it's good we have the microphone. So for accessibility. So one of the projects I represent is the Northeast ADA Center. We're one of 10 federally funded ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act centers across the country. We provide training, technical assistance, education on a variety of topics related to the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so there's always questions about the ADA. We have, or part of the ADA National Network, a 1-800 number that anyone can dial from anywhere in the country, and you will be routed to your ADA center, where we provide guidance and technical assistance and answer your questions. And that's 1-800-949-4232. So I share that as a resource. This is, I just want to let people, oh, and by the way, my ADA center swag has been sitting in my closet for 3 years because of this pandemic, so I grabbed it before I left home. There's different pens and little fun things, so please help yourselves. I put them out on the table out there. Please take them, so I don't have to take them back to Syracuse. And this slide, this toxic slide as I like to call it, but it's important, basically says, it's a disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. At the ADA Center, where we come to you because we're funded by NIDLR, our federal funding partner, and we are educators. So anything I say shouldn't be construed as legal advice, but I'm here to talk to you about the ADA and what it says. So let's get that stuff out of the way. So one of the things that Jan and Kathleen really wanted me to do was to talk a little bit about some of the research that we did for small businesses. And just kind of remind people that really, having been a member of a small business my whole life, small businesses are really a pillar, one of the pillars of our economy, that people with disabilities often tell us that and I think there's research that says 70% of people with disabilities say they prefer to work for small businesses as opposed to large ones. And so, the research that we did, we really wanted to know more about small businesses, especially when it comes to What do they know about accommodations? What do they know about the ADA? What do they know about disability? We found out, and this isn't a disparagement, I'll speak for my family business, we don't know a lot, right? It's not something that's on our radar. We're busy running a business, right? And so enter the small business survey that I actually am not one of the researchers, but I have wonderful colleagues that do this work, and I come to translate that information to you and make it understandable. So the survey that they led, and I'm going to talk to you just for a second about some of the why they did it and some of what they found out. And it's titled, The Small Organizations in Title I of the ADA, a Survey Study in Region 2. Not the sexiest title, I know. But having said that, it's really important work. And so we had a couple of different goals, right, when it came to the survey. One was to understand the barriers to ADA implementation in small employers. And then we're educators, but we also develop products and interventions to help and support and guide. Our other goal was to identify effective ways to educate and support small employers as they try to implement the ADA. So the research was done in a couple of different phases. The first phase, essentially what happened is that we talked to a number of employers in 60-minute phone interviews to sort of ask them, like, what do you know about the ADA? What do you know about accommodations? And when we met with employers, we asked them two basic questions. Describe your organization's accommodation process, if you even know what that means, and explain what information and resources are or are not useful to you. So that was phase one, and we gathered information from employers. And then phase two was actually a survey that we sent out to 500 employers. I think ultimately about 300 plus employers completed the survey. So we learned a lot, but I only have 20 minutes. And so what I'll tell you, I kind of broke down what might be most important to know today. Some of the barriers to inclusion that we learned about. First, and I should say that the barriers that I'm going to talk about are kind of clustered in three main areas. So the first barrier is that small business employers lack, I kind of already said this, right? ADA-related knowledge. Things like small business employers told us they don't know how disability is defined. What does disability even mean? Employers told us they have limited understanding of accommodations and different types of disabilities. Employers told us they're not sure how to implement an effective accommodation process, among other things. One of the other categories, and I know for those of us in this room that have been doing this work for a long time, or even not so long a time, won't be surprised to know that employers talked about fear and stigma remaining a significant barrier to disability inclusiveness, right? I feel like I've been singing this song for 30 years, but right, Michelle? I know, the misconceptions about the cost of employing people with disabilities and concerns about accommodation costs really do influence employers' decisions to hire and accommodate individuals with disabilities. Now, what I always say, I'll go off script a minute, I often say employers have very real in their minds concerns and reasons to not hire, right? And so, our job here is to help educate, shed light, and present some of the facts. And then the third kind of category I'll go over here that, was that small businesses lack internal policies and processes to implement disability inclusive practices. So those were some of the barriers. The other thing I pulled out, I had so much to draw from, and I wanted to find what I thought might be most relevant from the research. And one thing I pulled out also that we learned through our survey and our research is the top 5 information needs of managers and employees. And I thought that this might give you kind of an idea of some of the questions, the comments, the knowledge that small employers told us they needed, right? I guess I should say more globally, we discovered that everyone needs information about the ADA and disability inclusiveness. That was the one thing, right? So, in fact, one of the things that I was talking to my sister who runs our small business about this, and she said one of the things she realized is, oh, I don't know anything about the ADA, even though you're my brother. And I don't know, all I know is we have, I guess, made accommodations without realizing it for 30 years. Because not that anyone disclosed a disability, but it's the right person for the right job. And so that was one interesting finding to me. But some of the things that came out of our research and some of the questions that people had, what can I ask an applicant or employee about their disability? I know for the service providers in the room, this is often a question we have too. What can or can't I ask? How do I recognize when an employee discloses a disability? Disclosure of disability isn't always what you might think it might be. How do I respond to an accommodation request? What if someone asks for an accommodation? What do I do? Well, how timely do I have to be? How is disability defined under the ADA? The ADA does have some specific definitions of disability. And then small business employers said, what's my organization's accommodation process? And again, some small employers don't have one, right, necessarily. So some of the recommendations that came out of the research, and I'm going to tell you what we developed after that, is tools to support ADA implementation and disability inclusiveness. We learned through talking to these employers through our survey, offers step-by-step guidance on how to respond to accommodation requests. Employers are busy, right? I need, kind of concrete step-by-step guidance. How do I go about this? How do I do this? Employers also told us, and we divined, that it's important to allow flexibility and options in utilizing the tools or selecting strategies. I always say there's no cookie-cutter approach, right? You can have one person on the autism spectrum, say, I'm using that as an example, and another person who have dramatically different needs based upon their disability, the impact in the workplace functionally, and just the situation in the workplace that you're trying to accommodate. So flexibility is important. Include realistic and contextually rich case studies to bridge knowledge and practice. Employers told us, and we figured out pretty quickly, that they don't just want a bunch of ADA jargon, right? They want information in, and I think it's actually the very next one, in jargon-free, plain language, right? Tell me what to do in language that I can understand, right? Use case studies, make it real for me. So that was another lesson that we took away. And then create a one-stop solution. Some employers told us that, when I want to look something up about disability employment accommodation, I have to kind of hunt and peck. I have to look here, I have to look there. There's a lot of great stuff out there. I go to the Job Accommodation Network, Ask Jan, all the time, even though we're the Northeast ADA Center, because I tend to like their stuff and what they do, right? And so create the one-stop solutions. So with all this said, what we did, ta-da, it's one of my, there's a little curtain transition opening up. I know people that tell me not to use it, but I don't listen because I like my animations to make things a little more interesting, which is our Small Business at Work Toolkit. So all of this work and research culminated in the development of this toolkit. It's one toolkit, it's online, it's 8 topics. I promise you, I am not trying to sell you anything. This isn't a sales pitch. It is at no cost to you. We are federally funded. Our job is to educate. So I love the toolkit. I know employers that have used it have loved the toolkit. And by the way, another little secret, small or large, I found that regardless, the tools have been really useful. Some of the special parts of the toolkit are a situation room with scenarios that help you practice the information, so some case scenarios. One of the other highlights is what to do mini guides that clearly and concisely summarize key points in plain language. Like literally the what to do mini guides will say, do this, don't do this. Like just examples of what you might do when you're in a certain situation. If you're busy, you need to look something up, the idea is that you just can look at this on the run. And then we also, for the employment geeks and the ADA geeks in the room like me, we have deeper dives for additional learning from recommended resources. So I mentioned we have 8 tools. There's no way I can go through all the tools, but I'm just going to pick a few. How are we doing on time? Because I'm not tracking it. We're good? Okay. The first tool, or one of the tools I'll reference, is just what we talked about in the intro, making the business case, right? People with disabilities often state that the biggest barrier in the workplace is not the disability, right? It's all those misperceptions about ability, the negative beliefs, though time and again misproven by research, or disproven by research, still drive employer decisions. I'm so happy, Kathleen, that you said in the very beginning of what you had to say, this is probably one of the most important things that I'm going to say here today. I'll probably say that again about something else, but it's about talent, not charity, right? Hiring people with disabilities is not just a nice thing to do. It's about getting good people who can contribute to your business success, and it's a key source of competitive advantage. So that's the business case. And remember, each tool has some case scenarios, some kind of print and go kind of materials under the what to do mini guides, and then some, classic contextual information. The other tool I'm going to review here today, this is tool 4, is about inclusion and why inclusion matters, right? I'll try to encapsulate this. Accenture in their study said, team performance improves by 50% when everyone feels included. So one of the things I always talk about when I talk about inclusion isn't just about people with disabilities. It really is about how all employees are treated in the workplace, not just someone who happens to have a disability. Think about it, someone with a non-obvious or not apparent disability that I believe Kathleen spoke to. Someone with a disability you don't see. Maybe it's a mental health condition. Maybe won't feel comfortable disclosing their disability and asking for an accommodation in an environment that lacks a spirit of trust, support, and connection, right? So it's messaging about how all employees are treated. So inclusion matters beyond just the accessibility of DEIA. We're all here today, tool 6, I should say, is about hiring and making your recruiting process and your hiring process accessible. Things like, do you inform applicants about their right to an accommodation? There's messaging, right? Are in-person recruiting and hiring events held in accessible locations? It's all about messaging. And consider partnerships as a part of hiring. We're all here today. I think down here, from what I know, people do I say down here because I live in Syracuse, people do a great job. I'm so impressed by this event. This is a part of considering partnerships, right? Partnering with organizations out there, and I know that the panel is probably going to speak to that as well. It is all about partnerships and moving beyond what your typical recruitment sources are to consider hiring people with disabilities. And then the last tool I'll go over before we end here is about, of course, we're the Northeast ADA Center, is about accommodations. And one of the things I say about accommodations all the time is that it's pretty, for anyone here, if you're an employer of any kind or you all work somewhere, it's probably pretty likely you're already accommodating employees. You may not realize it. Someone taking a college class that needs to take a longer lunch break to listen to a lecture, that's an accommodation. It's not due to disability, right? The spouse of a deploying service member needs a little time off to deal with family issues. That's an accommodation. I work remotely. That's an accommodation. When I started my job before the pandemic, I said, there's no way I'm driving the hour from Syracuse to, I didn't say it like that. I promise you I have more tact than that. But I said it would be very challenging for me with 3 young kids to drive from Syracuse to Ithaca every day. And the accommodation was a flex place plan with some remote work, some in-person work, right? Nothing to do with disability. But so I say that to say that accommodation just means making some changes to meet the needs of employees so they can perform their jobs better. I love to think about accommodations as productivity enhancers, right? Or as, what is it about that accommodation that will help the person do the job better? Because employers have every right to expect productive employees, right? And so, and I also talk to service providers a lot about that. Think about accommodations. A lot of times we know that mindset is it's going to be expensive. It's going to get in the way. That's right. Michelle's shaking her head no, because the reality is that we have to think about them as making people more productive. That's what I just gave examples of my own accommodations that have done that for me. So I'm going to truly end here today. You might be like, Jeffrey, why is there a red old school rotary phone on the screen? And other than I like things retro, that is not the reason. I like to talk about setting the tone and messaging to our employees, to our colleagues, and all of our communities that disability inclusion matters to my business, right? So we want to send the message, this is setting the tone, that inclusion is about business, not about pity or charity. And truly the final thing I'm going to say is that, and I actually went to a TED Talk or watched a TED Talk recently, and it really got me inspired. It wasn't about disability, by the way, but one of the messages was from this TED Talk, it was about inclusive diversity, is the idea is that disability inclusion can't be looked at in a vacuum, right? It's really about this concept of this inclusive diversity, that we all need to be included in the conversation, even the skeptics, right? Even the naysayers or the people that aren't sure, which is a lot of people, which until you have the knowledge and education, maybe you will be. Convince me, tell me. So we can't just be people with disabilities and their allies having the conversation, or else we're in that echo chamber, right? So we all need to be a part of the solution. I think that's why we're here today, and I appreciate everyone's time. And check out, oh, look, one more curtain opening up, the Small Business at Work Toolkit. So thanks so much.
Jeffrey, thank you so much for that presentation. It was so valuable. And I hope people here see it that way. So we heard a lot of buzzwords and some really significant sentences and phrases, but people with disabilities have talent. Access is not that difficult, right? So I'm so glad to have the panelists here today. And we're gonna open up right now for questions. So the first question that we have is, what has made employing people with disabilities better for your organization or company? And I want to first open this up to Sean.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sean Meade. I'm the general manager at the Cambria Hotel. I'm also the president of the Westchester Hotel Association in Westchester County, which sounds like a very important role, but it's not. It's just a bunch of general managers. There's 40 hotels in Westchester County. And the reason why I bring that up is our hotel, the Cambria White Plains Downtown Hotel, we do a great job employing people with disabilities. This is kind of an untapped resource that we've had and we feel that we have. And the question from Kathleen, the way I look at it is, it's when you say it's not charity, trust me, I run a business that needs to be profitable. It's not charity. It makes you feel good, but at the end of the day, if I don't perform to the shareholders that own our company, I don't have a job, right? So my goal is to bring people onto our team to get the job done, right? Taking care of our guests, taking care of our employees, and the third part is making money for our ownership. And that's just what it is. I know it sounds very not fluffy and warm and fuzzy, but businesses have to survive and they have to make money. So when it comes to employing persons with disabilities, they play a role, a very large role in our hotel. We go up and down with the number that we employ, but it makes you feel good, but it also gets the job done. There's a lot of advantages to hiring people with disabilities. We can talk more about that if you'd like. But for us, it's getting the job done, and they play a significant role. And as I get more experience in working in this field or employing people with disabilities, I had no idea. Like for us, I work with ARC Westchester. Maria Vargas is here today. I also sit on the Business Advisory Council for Project Search, Autism Enhancement. And I don't know, I just kind of feel like they just show, when I have a need, an employment need, I go to Maria and I say, Maria, I have a whole, I'm having struggling to find somebody to hire in this position. Can you help me?
And, Maria's here today.
2 days later, I have a handful of people that I can interview, that I can talk to. We help with ARC Westchester and do mock interviews. So the reason why I'm here today, and thank you for having me, Jan, and it's been a great experience, and the untapped resource that we have in our hotel, I would like it to be used across all of the hotels in Westchester County, because it does get the job done, and it does make you feel good as well too, which is important.
Great, thank you, Sean. James?
Sure. Good morning. My name's James Mase. I'm from the Prospector Theater, and our mission is to provide competitive and inclusive employment for people with disabilities. We opened in November of 2014, so people with disabilities have been a part of our organization from the beginning. There are about 120 prospects who work at the theater. All employees are called prospects. I'm a prospect. Anybody working in the box office, concessions, all prospects. About 75% of us identify with a disability. And so what I love about the theater and the Prospector is that people with disabilities are at the front of the organization. They're interacting with guests each day. And for all the statistics that were shared, about 80% of people with disabilities don't have a job, and we're showing how people with disabilities can sparkle and can shine at their jobs, and it gets that message and our mission out there to more businesses in the community. For guests who've never had a connection with someone with disability, or weren't aware of accommodations or different disabilities, we're able to show what people with disabilities are capable of through the work that's done every day at the theater. We're so much more than just a movie theater. We like to say we take someone's sparkle, so what they're talented, what they're passionate about, and match them to the right profession. So for the movie theater that has so many different jobs, whether it's ushering, box office concessions, production, in creating videos for our YouTube, TikTok, social media. We take what they're talented, what they're passionate about, say graphic design, art, and try to find the job that makes sense and matching them to that right profession. And so what ends up happening is people with disabilities just love coming to work each day, and we are able to show our audiences that value through what's on our screens, what's in our lobby. And so for us, for our business, the reason it's been so great is just because we're able to spread our mission to our community, and we continually work to try to show more people, more businesses, the value that people with disabilities add to the workforce. And like everyone said so far, our founder coined the term very early that what we do isn't nice, it's just good business. And yeah, I think that's just what we aim to show every day with the about 122 of us that are working at the Prospector. There's so much more, but it's hard to
That's a good start,
keep
James.
it with just that.
Good start.
Yeah.
By the way, if anybody is in Ridgefield, Connecticut, please stop by the Prospector Theater. It's an amazing place, and it's not old movies. They
Yeah,
show
first
all the
run
current
movies.
movies.
You have little kids, Super Mario
And it's
Bros.
right in the center of the community of Ridgefield.
How far is that from here? Not
Uh,
being myself.
Probably, yeah,
Now?
with traffic this morning, probably more like 45, but yeah, going up 35 minutes or so.
Thanks for sharing that, James.
Yeah.
What about you, Jackie? What about in terms of,
Thank you. I don't need the microphone. I just need my hands. So my name is Jacqueline Mamorsky, and I'm the project coordinator for My Sister's Place. And my responsibilities are to focus on improving deaf services for deaf survivors, plus for the deaf community at large, with healthy relationships education for middle school and high school students, deaf students, as well as adults. And I think what's really important, especially for people with disabilities in the deaf community who actually are professionals and that they have bachelor's degrees and master's degrees to show that we have the skills necessary and that we can do more than just our disability. And working for my sister's place has really shown that and been able to be a role model for not-for-profit organizations, that you can work with people with disabilities like me. And the way that we create it, really, it's a beautiful relationship to see how we improve services in general for deaf people, not just for survivors, but for the deaf community in Westchester. And to show that even with a small organization and limited resources and budgets, when you work together, you can learn how to make those accommodations, to see what works, what doesn't work, what's good for short-term and what's long-term goals. And to show that we can be a model for other organizations who need to do this, and specifically not-for-profit organizations, to see that you can do the same thing that we've done. Like you've said, with small businesses, if we can do it, then they can do it. So, yeah, I think it's a really great position to show, even my role focusing on deaf survivors, but it's my skills. It's not my disability. They didn't hire me because of my disability. They hired me for my skills.
Thank you, Jackie, for sharing that. And now we're going to ask in terms of, why did you decide to do this? Why did you decide to employ people with disabilities, Sean, in your hotel?
So I share this story from time to time, and it doesn't really make me feel that proud, but I'm here today, and that makes me feel proud. New York Presbyterian had reached out to the Cambria Hotel and said, would your general manager, they didn't speak to me first, they said, would your general manager like to be part of the Business Advisory Council for Project Search? And in my head, immediately, I thought, wow, this would be a great opportunity to do good things, but also to maybe get some business at the hotel from New York Presbyterian, which is a large contributor in White Plains. And boy, when I got there, we meet once a month for the project search. And when I got there on the first day, I was like, wow, this is really where I belong. This is a great opportunity. So for me, it started out as something selfish, right? How do I get more for me? But it opened the door for me, and it allowed me to talk about the work that we do. It's connected me to a lot of great individuals who do have disabilities. And it's gone from there. I started partnering with the Culinary Tech Institute of White Plains as well. They have done an amazing job in supporting the Cambria Hotel. And I met Maria and her team at ARC Westchester. So for me, it started out as something that I'm not super proud of, but in full transparency, it got my foot in the door, and here I am today. So thank you.
So I briefly mentioned our visionary and founder, Valerie Jensen. She was a special education teacher and was also a executive director at a nonprofit in Ridgefield called Sphere that put on plays starring people with disabilities. So at the time, Ridgefield didn't have a movie theater. Valerie was working with people with disabilities, putting on these plays, and saw how much free time they had, didn't have jobs, and ultimately the need for jobs for people with disabilities. So she set out to put this movie theater in the town of Ridgefield with the goal to support people with disabilities by giving them a job. And since being opened in November 2014, over 300 prospects have been employed, all earning paychecks at competitive wages. In Connecticut, we pay $1 above the minimum wage for all prospects. And we've always tried to keep it at that level, because when we earn paychecks, we're able to live independently, buy things we want to, be a part of the community, and really reinvest that money back into the town of Ridgefield. A majority of prospects do live in Ridgefield. I know we'll get into transportation discussion in a bit, but when we earn paychecks, we're able to go and show not only what people with disabilities are capable of in the workforce, but why it's good business, keeping the economy moving forward, investing that money, going out to dinner back in the community, and just being able to live independently, which is what we all want as we grow up. And so Valerie starting this business has created such a community within Ridgefield that we just want to spread to other communities out there. I thought it was interesting, Jeffrey had mentioned about 70% of people with disabilities prefer to work in small businesses.
Yeah, there was one study anyway. So
Yeah.
70% prefer small over large businesses.
So we've been talking about what makes sense and trying to get bigger businesses, but in more prospectors and different communities and exposing that to more people and creating more jobs. And it just goes to show, at least for us with the prospects we have, that sense of independence, but also that confidence that comes with it, and educating the community of our mission and model. And so that's where it started and where it's going and where we hope to see it grow.
Thank you, James.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, do you want to add anything to that?
Just one, well, should I, is this
Sure.
working? Is this working?
Yes.
Okay, so just one thing that you made me think of, is again, I couldn't get into everything in the time I had, is that one of the things that the small businesses often told us, the word family came up a lot, and I mean in the concept of, we're like a family here, whether or not my family's small business, we are related, but that people feel like we're a family. We do what we have to do, and I think about that when you talk about, when that, I don't know the reason that's exactly 70% of people said they prefer a small business, but I would surmise that one of the reasons is that people in a small business just feel like, you're taken care of a little better, people look out for each other, right? And so that family metaphor came up a lot in our work with small businesses. The other side of that coin is we always, not every small employer is necessarily going to be at the level of, say, well, whether you're a small employer or not, of Sean or James, is that, sometimes what can happen is if there's one way of doing things, this is how we've always done it, sometimes people with disabilities don't have a seat at the table when it comes to accommodations, right? So that's the caution of the family metaphor, but there's benefits to the family metaphor as well. So, thanks.
Thank you. And the one common thing that was discussed at this moment was in regards to productivity. So it doesn't matter who is employed, you're also focused on having a business, and that's important to you. So again, people with disabilities, it's not a charity to employ them, because there's still expectations, and they will fulfill those expectations.
Can I add something, Kathleen?
Sure.
So the Cambria Hotel is not a family business, but what we have is culture, right? And I think, and I hope this comes out the right way, people with disabilities are looking for employment, but we want gainful employment. We want employment where people belong and they're in a good culture, right? And sometimes when you work for these larger conglomerates, right, our hotel is a franchised hotel, so it's managed by a company that only has 40 hotels, which is a smaller business. But most people can go choose and work anywhere they want. But we've all had I've had a couple really bad jobs in my life. But when you bring up the word family, I immediately associate that with culture, right? And it's the value that culture brings to an organization. What Jeffrey just said, about things being set and not wanting to change. One of our culture values at our hotel is change is good, right? And sometimes I have Will Saffron helps at our restaurant in the morning, and I don't know what his disability is. I don't know if I'm allowed to ask what his disability is. I'm not and I'm probably not the best person even to be up here right now, because all I know is that I have people that work at my hotel that perform well.
Right.
They're the most punctual people that I have. They never call out. When you think about hospitality, what's important? Showing up, being friendly, smiling, helping people. And these are all things that they do really, really well. Well, just a quick story. Will pulled me aside, and we have a breakfast order sheet that he fills out every day. Hotels are great because we have a lot of checklists. Like our front desk checklist is 15 pages long, and there's a lot of structure. But Will came to me the other day. He goes, Sean, I got this idea. Why don't we take the breakfast ordering form and make it a Google Sheet so you can see when we're low on something, and that will be your cue to order more of that product. And I was like, Will, this is amazing. Like, and then it took me. It was just an amazing idea. I didn't even think about Will had a disability. I just said, here's an individual that had a great idea on how to make this a better place to work, but also a better place to stay. So for me, the value is just exponential as they stay longer and you're fine. And we're going to talk a little bit more about sometimes we have challenges, and we work through those as well too, just as we do with anybody else when we talk about inclusion, right, or making special accommodations. You know, everybody sometimes needs to be coached a little bit. So I just wanted to share that story about Will, because it just happened yesterday, and I'm like, wow, it's amazing. Thank you, Will.
Can I say one thing?
Sure. Can we, Jackie first?
Yeah.
Jackie?
I just wanted to bring up how many people with disabilities might prefer to work in a small business, and I truly understand that. I think it's because we know that it's easier to have conversations and interactions with coworkers or with our boss and employers without accommodations that are set up on a regular daily basis. With a bigger business, we might feel that we're missing or that we're lacking in something. There might be a big budget, but it might not apply to us with regards to our accommodations. And so they might not actually see our work, you know, and the diverse roles that we play. So that's a reason why I think a lot of people might prefer to work for a small business. And also, I just want to add, with small businesses, you know, it often feels easier to get promoted as opposed to a big business where it might feel like we're stuck in a role forever, you know, because my value might not be noticed, it might not be seen. So I just wanted to add that.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. So my next question is, and I know, Sean, you touched a little bit on this, but in terms of partnership support that you find helpful in the community or that has guided you towards employing people with disabilities?
So it's all about the partnerships, right? You have to, if the partnerships aren't there, then there's no connection, right? If I wasn't able to just call Maria or text Maria and say, hey, I need help with this position, or in Project Search, you know, reach out to them when we need support, there is no, what we do doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist at a lot of hotels, right? And hospitality is a great place to work for many people. Not everybody likes working in hospitality, but I do, and the people that work at the hotel, I think they do as well. So we have to establish those partnerships and have those connections throughout the community, because that's kind of where the real magic happens. And it's like, once you have them, they're there for an extended period of time. And if you don't have them, you're really missing out.
Great.
So at the Prospector, we do not utilize any job coaches or any outside organizations. We do have candidates apply maybe through Ableist in Connecticut or come to us through an organization. But within the theater, we don't utilize job coaching. What we really base a lot of our model is teaching and training. So when I started at the theater 2 years ago, I didn't know how to pop popcorn. A prospect who's been working there for 8 years teaches me how to pop popcorn, and then I'm able to teach more and more prospects. And we all learn in different ways. So we have what's called standard operating procedures, where a prospect can come in maybe after watching how to pop popcorn one time and look at an SOP, and that might be written in steps. Maybe there's pictures, there are videos about it. So trying to utilize all these different supports to help a new prospect or a prospect who may have forgotten how to do the job. And over 8 years, it wasn't a seamless process. It took a lot of mistakes, understanding, and that's ultimately how we all learn, is through those mistakes, through trial and error, finding what works for somebody. And a lot of time, a new prospect, someone with this disability, might have a unique way of learning that ultimately probably will benefit somebody else down the line. One of the things that I like to talk about is a prospect who might not be able to read. We have what's called a C-pen at the box office that acts as a highlighter, where you highlight a word on a paper and it can read it back to you. So we're trying to find the accommodations, whatever workaround that helps a prospect do the job that they want to do. So those are all learning tools and ways we work through those instances where we don't have job coaches or anything like that within the organization. I'd say most of our partnerships comes with talking with the community members, people with disabilities. We started having closed caption screenings and taking ASL classes because we had people from the deaf community come into our theater, which sparked, taking classes, and prospects then can interact with our speeches at the concession stand, knowing little words like popcorn, movies, and to be able to interact with any guest that comes through. So those kind of supports are how we've been able to grow our business, and it's usually with the community and the disability community, and learning from them and what others' needs may be.
Thank you, James.
Yep.
Jackie, do you want to add anything?
Yes. First of all, if you would sign popcorn to me, I would say yes, please. I love popcorn. Thank you. And so part of what, I'm very lucky because part of what I do is
The education.
I work with the education and figuring out how we can work together to improve accessibility for myself to be able to work there, but also for survivors and for other deaf people. But we're also lucky to have collaborations with partners who really help my boss and other people that I work with to see where the gaps are in the community and to see other professionals, deaf professionals specifically, and people that we can partner with. And
Partner with like the New York School for the Deaf, and they can see deaf social workers.
and guidance counselors and principals and even deaf superintendent. So it's one way for people to work with organizations that
Seeing other deaf professionals.
are allowing people to see other deaf professionals and their abilities, that they can do it, that we can see in Westchester what people are able to do in their businesses and in their professional life. So I feel very lucky with our collaborators who help open up the eyes and letting people see what is out there.
And I just want to add that in terms of what was discussed here is that there's, even if you're not in Westchester, if you're outside, there's so many different resources on the website, resources that you can find in terms of organizations around you, nonprofits, even Access VR, who's here today, has so much information in terms of employing people with disabilities and what resources you may tap into.
And then if I can just add to that, I think the opportunity, is that connection, right? It's we have websites, we have communications. I got invited to speak, and there's so many acronyms in this field that's really hard, but I think OPWDD. Jeez. Up in Albany, I was invited, and the reason why I say I don't think I belong here, or I'm not, but like for me, I'm just trying to run a business right? And I'm employing people. Some people have disabilities, some people don't have disabilities. But I was invited up to Albany to speak in a similar fashion to why I'm here today. And I could not believe how much work it takes to get Eddie, to get Stephanie, to get Will to our hotel, right? The resources that are available, it's like, wow, it's like you just think that they magically show up at your door, and they kind of do just magically show up at your door. But for me to start learning some of the struggles in the resources that are available to these organizations, but for me, I just think of it so simple. I run a hotel. I need to have people work here in order to be successful, right? There's a resource that has people that can work at my hotel that do a very good job. So all we want to do is just connect the people who want to work with the hotels that need work. And I know it's not that simple, but in my head, that's the way I see it. And hopefully we can simplify or just make this process for other hotels in Westchester County and other areas to be able to succeed the way we have.
Thank you, Sean. And one of the,
I'd like to add one more thing, if I could.
yes, sure.
In terms of what you said about that it really is kind of simple, in my perspective, it may not be simple in terms of the hiring process for me. I've always had anxiety every time I go in for a job interview. Do they know that I'm deaf? Will I get the interview? Once I get into the interview, will they be okay if I need an interpreter? Will they ask me if I read lips? Or I have to make sure that everything runs smoothly when I have the interview. Will they understand that I have the skills? Will they be willing to do the accommodations and make those accommodations or not? Also, will I have to let them know, okay, I do need to explain if you hire me, then I don't need an interpreter every day, but just maybe for meetings. Will they understand that, or will they say no? So I know you say it's simple in terms of theoretically, and I agree. Once you can get that disability barrier out of the way, it should be, but in terms of working together and having those accommodations. But for many people with disabilities, including me, who really want a professional job, really want to work and use the skills that I have, we have that anxiety. To see, will they respect me? Will they see my skills that I have? Will they see that whatever accommodations I need, it's not all the time. With a limited budget, there are things that can be done, so those are the considerations that I have.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Jackie, and that perspective on your end. It's really important to hear. One thing I do want to discuss in terms of transportation, I know the panel, when we were meeting, sometimes those are some challenges. So, Sean, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, certainly. So we're very fortunate because we're right in the heart of downtown White Plains. You can walk, you can take the train, you take the bus, you can drive. So we're very fortunate because of our location. I've also worked part-time at a place called Wegmans. It's just opened up in Harrison. And they do a phenomenal job in this area as well, too. They're a great place to work. And I started working there, and I'll make this real short, but I started working there because I love going there. And one day my son's like, hey, Dad, why don't you work at Wegmans if you love it so much? And I'm like, oh, my God. So I get there, and I see what they're doing, and I learn things from a big organization like Wegmans is. But the transportation, they're not downtown. They do have a bus stop there. But you hear these stories of these challenges that they have is, getting to their place of work, like a hotel. Like Will, who works at our hotel, has to be there at 5:30 every morning. He walks to work. But the accessibility part prevents some great applicants who, you hear a story, and I don't know what's true and what's not true, but having to wait excessive time or getting dropped off. You can't be late to work at a hotel, unfortunately, and that goes for everybody, and it's challenging, but where it's how do you make it easier for people to get to where they need to go and get home after, right? Because sometimes at Wegmans you'd see people waiting around for an extended period of time, and they're not just hanging out, they're waiting to get home, and they're waiting on some sort of transportation to get home. I don't know how all that works, but I just know that more hotels would be willing and able to hire people if they had a reliable source of transportation that can get them up there on time when they need to be, and just as important, get them home when they need to be.
James, did you want to add?
Sure. So yeah, I briefly mentioned transportation before, but it's certainly one of the challenges for, anybody, but with people with disabilities, maintaining the job as well. 40% of prospects live in the Ridgefield community, so they're able to walk to work. But other prospects who may live in the surrounding towns rely on transportation, and there's not a great bus system into Ridgefield, so they're relying on parents, loved ones, friends. And fortunately for us at a movie theater, that's unique. We don't just show movies, we create videos, we're working on projects every day. Our hours really go from 9 till 10 o'clock at night. So there's a lot of room for somebody who can only work the night shifts or only in the mornings when they can get that ride. But for some prospects who live in a group home, rely on an Uber or some sort of transportation that may be unreliable that we've seen, and they're not able to come to work, they're not able to earn that paycheck that then lets them live independently and pay for groceries, the things they need. And we want everybody to be able to work, but in a competitive work environment, whether it's a hotel, us, at their next job. If you're late too often, or if you're missing your shifts too often, it trickles down. There's an effect across the board, and ultimately not able to maintain a job if that's a consistent problem. So transportation can be a really big challenge for a lot of people, and it's unfortunate that it can be out of their control on a lot of occasions. So it's something we've looked into with grants, transportation systems, but there's not a ton out there that make a lot of sense for us right now, but it's certainly something we've always considered and thought about, and that's why a lot of prospects who start working have moved to Ridgefield so that they can walk to work and be so close to be able to maintain their job.
Thank you, James.
So I live in an auditory world every day, every night. So in terms of transportation with bus or train, it's all auditory. For example, when I go to New York City, and I tend to take the train from North White Plains. And for many, many years, they had structural stuff going on. And sometimes they would make an announcement, okay, from North White Plains to New York, change tracks. I didn't know that. I would feel anxiety again. I'd see people leaving or moving and going back home, or I didn't know if they were going to another track. I didn't know what was going on. And I'm just standing there waiting, and then I have to run. And so really that needs to improve. So it's not only an auditory experience, but there is signage and there's scrolling, and there's something, same thing with the bus system. All the buses have, this high technology. So if one bus is out of service or a bus is skipping stops for whatever reason, then I'm late. So it'd be really nice for us if we didn't have to rely on that audio and we had more visual cues to give us information.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. And one question I have for you, Jackie, is how has your organization supported you in your work environment?
Wow, I could go on and on for a long time. It's really an amazing organization. I think in the beginning, when they first hired me, I think it was still kind of awkward how to make things work with interpreters, with one-on-one meetings. But I think once we had the conversation, and I let them know what works for me, and we can find money in the budget if we need to do that, and we do what we have to do. And I think with COVID also, one of the great things was working from home. For example, if there was a last-minute meeting and there was no interpreter, I could use the team on Zoom and we could chat while I'm looking at the video. Or I think one of the things with COVID is we saw how different accommodations were provided across the board. But really, for my organization, for every meeting, they provide interpreters. When COVID hit, we had a gala, Zoom, and we actually put interpreters in there and pre-recorded just to make sure, and they made sure that there were captions. So one of the best experiences recently, we have mandatory training. And it wasn't related to my work specifically. It was general for the organization. And I didn't think anything of it. I was really, it's mandatory training, okay, and you just learn more. And then one person, one of the presenters in the training, actually provided a videotape with captioned and American Sign Language. She didn't have to do that. But I felt very included because I felt very seen. And that was really full access. And that's what you do for people in an organization. And that was one of the best experiences I had recently.
Well, kudos to my sister's place. Thank you, Jackie.
So as I'm here today, and I'm always learning and listening and trying to do the best I can, I hear what I'm going to describe as value, right? We're not talking about money value, but value has to be reciprocal, right? As a manager, the employees need to have value, but it's the other way around. They need to feel value, right? Mm-hmm. They need to feel as part of the organization, as part of the team. And when I hear Jackie speak, I feel that value that she has working there. And it makes me feel good that hopefully we're providing value similar to what the organization is that she works at as well too. So that value is important. It has to go both ways for people with disabilities and for people that don't have disabilities, right? That value piece is important.
And it's definitely inclusivity, right? Inclusivity of having people with disabilities, without disabilities being together in the workplace.
Yeah, if there is, and I don't even, again, I'm probably not the best person to be speaking up here, but it's so, when you're running a business, we're looking for people. When after we were just talking about COVID, Eddie, who is one of the persons with disabilities that work at our hotel, he was one of the first 3 people that we brought back. Why? Because his value for the hotel was I knew he was going to be on time. I knew he was going to do his job correctly. I knew we could depend on him. I knew there was value in it. So it's I think what I'm learning here is that we also need to find ways to create value, right? If somebody came to my hotel that was deaf or hearing impaired, I wouldn't know what to do. I can go to Jeffrey's website now, but that piece right there, right? Yeah, or give somebody a call. But those are the types of things that I want to learn more about. And then it's contagious, right? It's where we started doing this, and hopefully others will continue and see that there's a lot of value.
And if I can add, one of the things we talk, you just made me think of a lot of things, but one of the things that we talk to employers, managers about is that when something like that happens, where either someone requests an accommodation or you're confronted with a situation where you're unsure, is have that be your stopping point. Because what sometimes will happen is someone who doesn't know might just say, oh, we can't do that. Sorry, that's too expensive, or no, that's not how we do it, or we don't allow another person in the interview. A job coach, by the way, is a reasonable accommodation under the ADA. And so, but the stopping point is, I need to check this out. I need to talk to somebody. I need to talk to HR. I need to check out Jeffrey's website or call, whatever it might be, because otherwise, sometimes bad things can happen as well. Someone doesn't make the right decision, and it can lead to, whether the person means it or not, discrimination as well.
And thank you for that, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
I think there's an opportunity for Westchester, at least, we have quarterly meetings for the Westchester Hotel Association that are attended very well. We talk shop about hotels and stuff, but we also talk about ways we can work well within the community and partner with different organizations. So I'd like to have your organization come, or an organization similar, to speak to the other general managers, because just in the hour that we've been here today, I've learned a lot, and I'm really appreciative of being here, so thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And I hope everyone has really valued this as well. And what a fantastic conversation. And obviously we can be here for longer, but we have to cut it short. But I'm opening up now for any questions that anyone may have. Nancy?
Hi, I'm Nancy D. Miller. I'm the Executive Director of Vision, the Services for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And one of the sticking points right now is website accessibility, that many of the job seekers that we work with will go to a website and they can't find the employment application, or the application itself is not accessible. And then we get called by small businesses who say, I've had this website now for 10 years, and they're telling me I get a lawsuit that tells me now I have to make it accessible. Is there an easy way to do it? Which there isn't, to make it truly accessible. So really, I guess this is a question for Jeff on how clear is the ADA on the requirements on employers, and how do you help negotiate between the needs of the job seeker, who should have full access to all the information on a website, and an employer that maybe doesn't have a completely accessible website?
Well, I'll give you a partial answer, but it's not going to be a full answer. Website accessibility is a big topic right now, right? Michelle's nodding again, right? It's a really hot topic right now, and the ADA isn't really clear on that, on the topic of website accessibility at all. And the rules, it's kind of this moving target. So I don't have a clear answer to you, but what I will tell you, Nancy, let's talk for a minute after. I have a colleague that actually is a bit more, what I'm talking about, expert, has a little more knowledge on this topic of website accessibility. But it is an important topic to think about and address, because employers are required to make sure that because websites are a part of the public marketplace, right? What was the one case law, was it Target, I think, that got in a lot of trouble because they said, oh no, this isn't a part of the public domain, our website. It is, right? And so let's talk afterwards, Nancy.
And then if I could just add on to that as well too, the Hotel Association goes up to Albany each year, and there's a bill that's currently in legislation, and I don't know the technical terms for it, but the bill, as far as I understand it right now, the challenge that we have is that when there is a lawsuit that comes through because you're not accessible, they a lot of times do not specify what part of your website or what is wrong with your website that doesn't make it accessible, and then there's no time to cure, right? So we don't know what we're missing on our websites, right? And then we also don't have time to resolve it as well too. So I'd like to talk to you after as well, because we're going to Albany in another, I think, 30 days or so, and it'd be great to have a conversation about that.
Yeah, if I could just quickly say, I've been contacted by a number of legislators, and my response back is, don't put the onus on the person who's having trouble with your website, because they can't tell you what works if it doesn't work. So the legislation is written almost to the point that it's the person with a disability that has to explain it when they don't have access to it, to say, I can't give you a list of everything that's not accessible because it's not accessible. So I think legislation has to really look at, don't blame the victim, and make sure that we're in this together. We can't survive without business, but we can't survive without employees and diverse employees. And is there a way to really do what's right for everybody who's interested in making true access?
And I agree with you on that. I think it's easier, or it's more accessible on like the larger corporate, like Marriott, Choice. They're, but it's the smaller boutique hotels that struggle a little bit more with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
I think we have some.
We have more
comments on this
questions.
here.
Yeah. Marjorie?
Related to this maybe.
I wanted to follow up. I'm Marjorie Mathis. I'm the founder of Yes She Can and former executive director. And one of the things that you sort of alluded to was, oftentimes I say there's a difference between jobs and work. Work is what needs to get done. Jobs is what HR has created to organize components of work. One of the reasons why large businesses have a hard time employing people is because they have HR departments and legal departments. I'd like to hear a little bit more about how any of you have adjusted the work to be customized to the skill levels of different people, and how you can still get all of the work done without having to conform to a conventional job description.
It's your whole business model, James. I think,
Yeah,
right?
that's where Prospector.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of goes back to for us at least, matching that individual to the job. So a lot of prospects are hired as general prospects, and no matter what, I'm trying to think of a good example, but no matter what job they're in, we make sure they can do that job through our teaching and training model. Each prospect has what we like to call an individualized employment plan. So there are goals within that. We have our own assessment portal that's done with HR through their evaluations. That doesn't mean every prospect needs to hit a 4 out of 4 on the scale, but we want to make sure everyone's exposed to that job and supported to get that job done, whether it's popping popcorn with somebody there, supporting them on the way, or selling tickets, answering the phones, selling gift cards. It's all done to make sure that whoever is interested in that position is able to complete the job. It's a great question, but it's what we've done from the beginning, that it doesn't, the level of how somebody does the job isn't necessarily, it's never a limitation. It's always just a part of that team, and that's that prospect mindset of we're all in it together on a busy round of, you're in concessions and someone needs to get the ice, someone needs to sell whatever concessions someone wants. It's all about supporting that individual in the moment.
Thank
For
you,
like
James.
at the hotels, we'll take a look at the checklist, and if there's certain parts of the checklist that we might need to adjust and come back to at a later time, or shift responsibility. So for us, we're able to look at that daily, weekly, or monthly checklist and say, hey, here, it's a conversation starter for us, right? What can we train you in? What do you need to be trained in? And it's adjusting that checklist on a regular basis to help figure out the best way to do it.
Can I say one
And
thing
I
about
just,
that?
Jackie.
I just wanted to add, in terms of hiring with job descriptions, things I've noticed is clean language, very plain and straightforward language, is accessible to people with disabilities, and also people whose English is their second language. Whatever your job description is, the responsibilities should be stated very clearly and listed very plainly for everyone to understand. And then another thing is that a generic job description will say, you have to make sure that you're able to lift up to 25 pounds, etc. And you have to make sure that that applies to that specific job. And it could be a perfect fit for someone with a disability, but maybe there is part of that maybe there's part of that description that's a turnoff to an applicant. And so it's advisable to read all of the job descriptions and make sure that they're available and that the organization would be accessible for anyone with or without a disability so that they could apply for that job and understand it clearly.
Thank you. Jeffrey, you wanted to quickly mention.
Yeah, related to the topic that you were just talking about in your question, about, looking at the job and trying to figure out what'll work for someone. When I talk to employers and about what the ADA says about accommodations, one of the things that we talk about is, well, first of all, clear, and I like what Jackie said about clearly, in plain language, spell out the essential functions of the job in your job description. It's not required under the ADA, but it's important. And then what happens, and employers do not have to remove essential functions, that's why the job exists. Maybe accommodate the essential function, but marginal job functions or episodic job functions don't come up all the time. Maybe it's, you might be pulled once a month to run the cash register, right? And that's not something due to your disability or whatever that you're not able to do. So that creativity might mean looking at removing a marginal function, but the person would do more of something else, right? And that's that. And sometimes employers, and sometimes in larger companies, it can happen that, well, this is how we do it, right? Everyone needs to be able to do the cash register. Well, let's talk about how frequent that happens, right? And let's talk about adding value. Speaking of adding value, what value can the person bring? Productivity enhancer, I talked about before, to still remain productive, right?
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm sorry, we're going to have to wrap it up now. If you have questions, we will be available to you. Yeah. Great, thank you. So we'll have Jan talk.
So thank you so much. It seems like we are going to have to do a part 2 at some point because there are so many questions, and we will follow up. That is one thing we're really good about. I really want to take the opportunity again to thank our amazing speakers, panelists. Thank you so much for being here and for the work you do. To the Roundtable Advisory Committee, sponsors, everyone, thank you so much. A special shout out to Westchester County government. You see here today that we have 4 ASL interpreters. We wrote a request to county government, and we said we need this to make our work accessible while we advocate with the state to have this as a reimbursable cost at the state level. So our work continues. We have amazing programs coming up. Jackie will appear again in one of on May 11th. We have a panel on building culture, hiring and retention, and everybody on the panel is under 35 years of age because we have not heard from that group. Jackie will be participating, Amy Rivera from our team, and we need to hear from the next generation. So we're going to provide that platform, and we have a whole bunch of other really great programs coming up. So please join us. I hope to see you all at the Nonprofit Summit on April 4th and at a lot of events in the county. We will do a part 2. You can ask your questions. We'll do more for sure. Thank you.